On the 10th of April, history quietly repeated itself. 4 astronauts splashed down safely in the Pacific Ocean, marking the first time in more than 50 years that humans have traveled to the moon and returned alive. Artemis II has officially come to an end, but in reality, this is only the beginning. Their capsule now sits aboard the USS John P. Murtha, while the crew, Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen, are back in Houston undergoing medical checks. Even as they recover, teams on the ground are already moving forward at full speed. At the Kennedy Space Center, another rocket is being prepared. There's no long pause, no extended celebration. NASA knows that what comes next is far more challenging, and the timeline is tight. They are trying to accomplish in just a couple of years what has taken more than a decade to prepare for. That recent splashdown wasn't just the end of a mission, it was the starting signal for an ambitious return to the moon. The plan ahead is bold: send humans back to the lunar surface for the first time since Apollo 17 and begin building a lasting presence there. What makes it even more intense is that much of the equipment needed for this next phase hasn't yet been tested with people on board. One of the biggest concerns right now is the heat shield. During Artemis I, the Orion capsule returned with unexpected damage. Parts of its protective layer had broken away during re-entry, something engineers hadn't predicted. The spacecraft stayed safe, but the results didn't fully match what the models had suggested. For Artemis II, NASA adjusted how the capsule re-entered Earth's atmosphere to reduce stress on the shield. That change helped, but it didn't completely solve the issue. After this mission, the heat shield once again showed signs of wear, including cracks and uneven damage. NASA had anticipated this and moved forward anyway, confident the system would still perform safely, and it did. The astronauts re-entered at around 25,000 miles per hour, surrounded by extreme heat and cut off from communication for several minutes. Despite those conditions, everything worked as planned. The parachutes deployed correctly, the capsule slowed safely, and the crew landed right on time. The mission itself went remarkably well. Over the course of 10 days, the crew traveled to the moon, looped around its far side, and captured views that no human had ever seen directly before. They even experienced a rare solar eclipse from deep space, a moment that few people will ever witness. Along the way, they broke a long-standing distance record set by Apollo 13, traveling farther from Earth than any crew in decades. Each astronaut also reached new milestones. Jeremy Hansen became the first Canadian to travel beyond low Earth orbit, Christina Koch added to her already record-setting career, and Victor Glover became the first Black astronaut to journey toward the moon. Even so, the mission wasn't without its issues. Engineers are now reviewing several systems that need improvement, including the heat shield, a valve in the service module, and even the onboard toilet. While some of these may seem minor, they become critical when astronauts are living in a small spacecraft for days at a time. Now, all eyes are on Artemis III. The timeline is tight, and NASA is pushing forward with a clear mindset: keep testing, keep learning, and keep improving. A new version of the heat shield is already in development, but a major decision still lies ahead: whether the data from recent missions is enough to move forward safely, or if another test flight will be needed. That choice could shape everything that comes next. Artemis III is coming next, but it's not the mission most people think it is. For a long time, Artemis III was supposed to be the big moment. The plan was simple in idea, but incredibly complex in reality: send astronauts back to the moon for the first time since Gene Cernan left the surface in 1972. 2 crew members would land near the moon's south pole using a new spacecraft, spend about a week exploring, and then return safely to orbit. It was meant to be a month-long mission and one of the most challenging human spaceflights ever attempted, but that version of the mission has changed. At the start of 2026, NASA pushed the timeline back to at least 2028. Then, just a few weeks later, NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman made a surprising move. He brought Artemis III forward to mid-2027 with a major twist. This mission will not go to the moon at all. Instead, 4 astronauts will launch aboard Orion using NASA's powerful rocket system and stay in Earth orbit.
We're essentially going to pull in Artemis III to launch in 2027 with a revised mission profile. So instead of going directly to a lunar landing, we will endeavor to rendezvous in low Earth orbit with one or both of our lunar landers, test out integrated operations between Orion and the landers, ECLSS systems, even to the extent possible.
There, they will attempt something completely new. They will meet up with 1 or possibly 2 separate lunar landers built by private companies, SpaceX HLS and Blue Moon. These landers, known as Starship, HLS, and Blue Moon, will launch on their own rockets ahead of time. Once in orbit, the astronauts will dock with them, climb inside, and begin testing. They'll check how the engines perform, test life support systems, confirm communication works properly, and even try out new spacesuits designed for walking on the moon. In simple terms, this mission is a full practice run. NASA often compares it to Apollo 9, when astronauts tested the lunar module in Earth orbit before the first lunar landing. That mission didn't get much attention, but without it, Apollo 11 never would have happened. Artemis II plays the same role. It's where everything gets tested before the real landing. Right now, many details are still undecided. NASA hasn't confirmed whether the crew will dock with one lander or both, what exact orbit they will use, or which company's spacecraft will be ready first. A lot depends on how quickly SpaceX and Blue Origin can finish their work.
And that work is not easy. SpaceX faces a huge challenge with Starship. The lander must first reach orbit, then be refueled in space using many separate tanker launches. This means sending large amounts of fuel into orbit, transferring it between spacecraft, and preparing everything in time for the crew to arrive. It's a complex process that would have sounded impossible not long ago, and it's still uncertain. Blue Origin's Blue Moon lander follows a different design, but it also hasn't carried humans yet. Both companies must prove their systems work by completing test landings without a crew before astronauts are allowed on board. There's another complication. A recent report from NASA pointed out that these test flights may not fully match the final crewed versions. That means the first time astronauts use these landers in their final form could be during an actual mission. If neither lander is ready in time, NASA faces a serious problem. Without a working lander, Artemis III becomes just another trip to orbit, not the step forward it's meant to be. If everything does go well, then the focus shifts to Artemis IV. That's when the real goal finally happens. In early 2028, astronauts are expected to travel to the moon, dock with a waiting lander in lunar orbit, and descend to the surface. For the first time in 56 years, humans will walk on the moon again. This time, they won't land in the familiar flat regions explored during Apollo. They'll head to the moon's south pole, a place that is far more extreme and mysterious. Some areas there are in permanent darkness. Sunlight hasn't reached parts of these craters for billions of years. Temperatures can drop as low as minus 390 degrees Fahrenheit. Deep inside those shadows, scientists believe there may be frozen water, something that could be key for future missions and even long-term human presence. If you stood at the edge of one of those craters and looked down, you wouldn't see anything at all. No light, no reflection, just complete darkness. These craters are so cold they can freeze gases solid. Hidden inside them is ancient ice, likely brought by comets billions of years ago, long before life began on Earth. That ice is the main reason NASA is heading to the moon's south pole. It's more than just a scientific curiosity. That frozen water could be turned into drinking water, breathable oxygen, and even fuel for rockets. In other words, the South Pole isn't just a place to explore, it could become a key supply point for future space missions. NASA has already picked out several possible landing areas in that region. Each one has its own advantages. Some are closer to the permanently dark craters where ice may be stored, while others get more sunlight, which is important for power. But none of these places are easy to land on. The ground is rough, uneven, and far more difficult than anything astronauts dealt with during Apollo. When Artemis IV takes place, 2 astronauts will land there and stay for about a week. During that time, they'll step outside for multiple spacewalks using suits first tested on Artemis III. They'll set up scientific tools, including one designed to detect vibrations inside the moon and help scientists understand its inner structure. They'll also collect sample from an area no human has ever explored before. Once their work is done, they'll head back into their lander, return to orbit, dock with their main spacecraft, and make the journey back to Earth. The full mission will last around 30 days, far longer and more advanced than the Apollo missions, where astronauts only stayed on the surface for a few days. Which spacecraft will take them there is still undecided. SpaceX and Blue Origin are both developing landers, and the final choice will depend on how well each performs in upcoming tests. Safety will come first. Not long after that, Artemis V is expected to push things even further. This is where the mission changes from exploration to construction. When astronauts land this time, they won't just walk, they'll drive. For the first time since Apollo 17, a rover will be waiting for them on the surface. It will have been delivered earlier by robotic missions ready for use. With it, astronauts will be able to travel farther and explore more than ever before. But exploration isn't the main goal here. This mission is about building. Before the crew arrives, robots will have already already placed key equipment on the moon, things like power systems, communication tools, and other important hardware. The astronauts will activate these systems, connect them, and make sure everything works as planned. This is the first real step towards a permanent base on the moon. NASA sees this as a long-term plan, in stages. First, send equipment and test it. Next, add simple living spaces and work areas so astronauts can stay longer. Finally, create a fully working base where crews can live and work for extended periods, rotating in and out over time. The goal is clear. By the early 2030s, humans could have a steady presence on the moon. At that point, the moon stops being just a place we visit, it becomes a place we use. Scientists hope to turn lunar soil into building materials, extract useful resources like oxygen and water, and support missions that go even farther into space. This isn't a small effort, it's massive. $20 billion spread over 7 years, dozens of missions, private companies launching cargo again and again at a pace we've never seen for moon operations. One of the boldest ideas is sending a small nuclear reactor to the moon. It won't be huge like the ones on Earth, far weaker in fact, but compact enough to fit in something the size of a car. Its job is simple but critical: keep everything running during the long lunar night, which lasts about 2 weeks when solar power stops working.
And that's not all. Just before Artemis II launched, NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman revealed another ambitious project, a nuclear-powered spacecraft designed to reach Mars by the end of 2028. It won't land there, but it will test a new way of traveling through space. Whether it works or not, the lessons learned will feed directly back into future moon missions. At the same time, NASA has made some tough choices. The planned Lunar Gateway, a space station meant to orbit the moon, has been canceled. Instead, the agency is putting its time, money, and effort into building directly on the moon's surface. The focus has clearly shifted. Less attention on orbit, more attention on the ground. Less about circling the moon, more about living on it. Even the rocket system behind all of this, the Space Launch System, almost didn't make it. In 2025, there was serious talk of shutting it down because each launch costs billions of dollars. For a while, the future of the entire program looked uncertain. Then funding was approved and the rocket survived, but the message was clear: this program depends heavily on political support, and that can change quickly. There's also another factor pushing NASA forward: a growing race with China. China has already achieved major milestones, including landing robotic missions on the far side of the moon and bringing samples back to Earth. Their goal is to send astronauts to the moon by 2030 and eventually build their own base. If NASA stays on schedule, it could return humans to the moon a couple of years earlier, but if delays happen, that lead could disappear. And there are still many challenges ahead. The heat shield must be improved and proven safe. New landers from SpaceX and Blue Origin need to successfully fly. SpaceX in particular must figure out how to refuel spacecraft in orbit on a scale never done before, sending multiple tanker flights to fill a system that doesn't even exist yet. Blue Origin must get its lander off the ground and ready for human use. New spacesuits must work in harsh lunar conditions that can't fully be tested on Earth. And all of this has to stay on schedule, with steady funding and without major failures. Every part of the plan depends on everything else working. But right now, there's a reason for confidence. Artemis II proved something important. It showed that the Orion spacecraft can safely carry humans deep into space and bring them home. It showed that the heat shield, even with its flaws, can survive the extreme return from lunar distance. It showed that the rocket, the systems, and the international partnerships behind it all can work together on a real mission. 2 weeks ago, that wasn't proven. Now it is. There were also human moments along the way. During the mission, Reed Wiseman named a crater after his late wife. The crew named another after their spacecraft. These weren't planned. They simply asked mission control, and the answer was yes. Moments like that remind us this isn't just about machines and data. It's about people, what we explore, what we discover, and what we build together. In about 15 months, another crew will climb into Orion. They won't go to the moon just yet. Instead, they'll stay in Earth orbit and practice connecting with a lander that will one day take astronauts down to the surface. It may not sound exciting, it won't break records or dominate headlines, but it's a crucial step, one that makes everything else possible. After that, the real landings begin. Mission after mission, year after year, each one adding something new: power systems, communication networks, vehicles, habitats, and more. Piece by piece, a base begins to take shape. The return to the moon has been in motion for a long time. What changed recently is that it finally feels real. The crew made it home safely, the data is in hand, the next rocket is already being prepared. We've proven we can reach the moon again. Now, the real question is, can we stay? If you want to see how this story unfolds, stay with it, because the next few missions could define the future of humanity in space.